This is a CBS News special report. I'm John Dickerson in New York. CBS News can confirm that President Donald Trump has been indicted over his handling of classified documents. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins me now. Scott, what could Donald Trump know about an indictment against him that isn't public yet?
Just as he did last August when he announced on his social media platform that the FBI was searching his Mar-a-Lago estate, it was Donald Trump on his social media platform who announced he is to appear in court at 3 p.m. Eastern Time at the federal court in Miami. That's the Southern District of Florida. He's characterizing this as the boxes hoax, which has been his way of referring to the investigation into classified records that the federal agents seized from his property August 8th and have given rise to a special counsel investigation and for nearly a year, a broad-based probe with grand juries and witnesses of the former president of the United States.
The president has taken the first step by announcing this. There is no formal word yet. That initiates a political channel that we'll hold on to for a moment. But on the legal channel, the legal process, the next steps, what are the next steps in this process if, in fact, the president's timing that he's released and announced is correct?
In the federal court system, you usually have your initial appearance before a magistrate judge. That happens typically in person at a federal courthouse. Certainly, there would need to be significant security protocols put in place for a former president walking into a public courthouse at a pre-announced time. The cases typically then rise up to a district court judge in a federal courthouse. And let's be clear, in the federal system, judges are randomly assigned cases. And we emphasize that because this all raises the prospect that a former president could have his criminal case in front of a judge he appointed to the federal court. There are issues of recusal to get into later, but this begins with a magistrate judge in the federal court system, which nationwide prohibits cameras in the courtroom.
Scott, we both covered when the president was arraigned in New York. In that case, it was a similar timing issue in terms of the public word versus what the former president has announced. He said he has to show up at the federal courthouse in Miami on Tuesday at 3 p.m. There is no official word. Based on your reporting and recollections from what happened in New York, that disconnect in timing, where it's now, it's now a political thing, it's in conversation, but the official word hasn't come out. What kinds of complexities does that cause?
Well, first of all, there are going to be logistical complexities. When he appeared at the courthouse in Manhattan for that local prosecution, they nearly shut off several city blocks to keep the facility, the staff, the former president, his team, and those who were assigned to cover that story safe. Bike rack barriers, police brigades, police on horseback. It was a significant security protocol. No doubt with the former president announcing the date and time of his court appearance in Miami, there will need to be similar security protocols. They may have to limit access to the courthouse itself. But the former president, making this announcement himself, has done what he did in August, which is control the opening chapter of the narrative. He's characterized what this case is about. It may not line up with what the Department of Justice or the special counsel is going to say this case is about. Does it involve only classified materials? Is it broader? Is it wider? We know this same special counsel based here in Washington, D.C., has also been investigating efforts to overturn the 2020 election. But the venue is critical. If, in fact, the former president is to appear in the Southern District of Florida, that is quite simply not Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. juries have convicted 100% of the defendants in the U.S. Capitol attack, at least partially. There would presumably be a different jury and different judges and a different logistical system in subtle ways in Miami.
All right, Scott MacFarlane, thank you so much. We are now going to go to Bob Costa, who is on the phone, I understand. Bob, can you hear me?
John, good to be with you.
So what's your reporting telling you about what we know so far?
So I've been speaking to sources close to former President Trump's legal team in the last few minutes. They say this is going to be a political and legal war. They are preparing to dismiss this indictment, questioning how the special counsel, Jack Smith, has handled this investigation. They're preparing to raise a series of questions about how witnesses were handled, about how the attorney-client privilege was adjusted during the course of this investigation when Evan Corcoran, a lawyer for former President Trump, was forced by a federal judge to give over his notes and voice memos about his conversations with Trump. You also have many witnesses who have completed interviews in this process who have detailed in hours of interviews in front of a federal grand jury that, in their view, former President Trump was directly involved with the movement of documents, allegedly, in Mar-a-Lago, in the basement, in his office, and also from the White House when he left in January of 2021. All of the sources I have who are close to witnesses and lawyers who have been part of this federal grand jury say that Jack Smith is working with utter seriousness in this entire process. No public statements. He's saying nothing to the press. This is all about building a case about obstruction, illegal retention of documents. And Trump's legal team is now going to try to bring on some new players, I'm told, just in the last few minutes. Todd Blanche, CBS News has learned, who worked with Trump on the New York case that Scott MacFarlane was just detailing. He is likely going to play a major role now in this federal case as he tries to work with Trump to keep him ready for a trial. There's no likelihood, I'm told, by people close to Trump tonight, of any sort of plea deal or pleading to lesser charges, that this is going to be something that likely goes to trial.
And Bob, let's just review the bidding for those who are watching in terms of what might be a part of this indictment. The at issue is the Espionage Act, as you mentioned, unauthorized retention or disclosure of information. So that's two pieces. Retention means having the documents at all, and then disclosure of information means perhaps talking about it or handing it around to other people. The other possible charge is whether there was any theft or destruction of government documents, and then obstruction, as you mentioned it, also potentially a part of this indictment. Is that pretty much it?
John, to understand what's happening right now, you have to go back to January 2021 when Trump's leaving the White House after January 6th and the attack on the Capitol. He's furious with the political establishment, especially with the Department of Justice, and he works with his chief of staff at the time, Mark Meadows, and they fume about the Russia investigation. And they decide, based on CBS News reporting, to take some documents back related to the so-called Crossfire Hurricane investigation of Trump and Russian interference in the 2016 election. Trump brings some of these documents back to Mar-a-Lago. What has been investigated by the special counsel is whether Trump had criminal intent to take documents that were not his and bring them back to his property in Florida. Now, Trump sources say they are going to argue in federal court that Trump had the right to take these documents back because of so-called executive privilege. And they believe this could be adjudicated all the way to the Supreme Court. And they're going to fight this at trial, that he had the right in a blanket way to bring these documents back. But the special counsel, by moving forward tonight with this historic indictment, is saying to Trump and effectively to the American people that no president, even if you believe you have executive privilege, no one can take classified material out of a secure location without going through a full approval process. And if you try to obstruct the federal government, whether it's the National Archives or the FBI, from securing that material, which could include sources and methods about highly sensitive operations abroad, whether it's about Iran or China or U.S. allies, if you have that in your possession and you hold on to it, that's a potential criminal intent to commit a crime, to obstruct an investigation and obstruct the government from securing really sensitive stuff.
And affirming the principle of law that no one is above the law. The CBS News is reporting that there is a multi-count indictment involving the retention of national defense information and obstruction, as you were just discussing, and confirming that court date that the former president has announced on social media, that court date on Tuesday. Bob, you mentioned the term war that you're reporting was coming from inside the camp of the former president. Give us your assessment of both the legal channel and the political channel. Obviously, the former president, by announcing this first before there's official word, seeks to do as he has in politics, which is set the narrative before anyone else. Give us your sense, your assessment of both the legal channel and then the political channel, and whether they're the same thing.
when you step back and you try to understand why does the Trump campaign and Trump's inner circle, why do they see this moment as a political war? It's because, like any war, there are multiple fronts they are fighting on right now. They are facing a historic indictment for obstruction of justice, obstruction of an investigation, retaining these classified records, while also facing a still ongoing investigation by the special counsel of Trump's conduct in and around the Capitol attack. They also know that come August, Bonnie Willis, the Fulton County, Georgia district attorney, is expected, based on CBS News' knowledge of sources close to her, to potentially move forward with an indictment of Trump in some kind of RICO manner, which is the way they prosecute the mafia in recent decades, to say that Trump illegally pressured election officials in Georgia, all while he also faces that New York trial looming, as Scott MacFarlane and others have mentioned. And this is something that is so unprecedented in American history, but politically, it presents a lot of vulnerability to Trump, both legally and politically. And I was just in Iowa this morning, John, and so many of his rivals, including former Vice President Mike Pence, who I spoke to yesterday, he said it's time for the Republican Party, it's time for the American people. And he said it's straightforward. You have to recognize that Trump is someone, in his view, who does not follow the rule of law and is someone who does not have respect for the United States Constitution. That's coming from his own former vice president.
Extraordinary. CBS News Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Ricky Kleeman now joins me on the line, a CBS News legal analyst. Ricky, your reaction to this news? Ricky, Ricky?
John, hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Ricky. Your reaction to the news of this indictment?
Well, I think that the indictment was expected at this point in time. It was clear that President Trump has been a target of this particular probe about the Mar-a-Lago documents since day one. He was obviously the one person that the government was looking at. I think the surprise is that we found out about it in the evening, and we found out about it by his posting on Truth Social. So I think that rocked some of us a bit, right, because we expected it to be very formal, as these things usually are. The charges themselves, I think, were anticipated by those of us who have followed the case. You have a former president who allegedly took documents that were classified, removed them from the White House, did not return them when asked to do so by the National Archives. And as always, the cover-up, as they say in quotes, is usually greater than the crime, and that's really what caused his problems. We know that there have been classified documents.
Ricky, I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut you off. We've hit the end of our time. Thank you. Our coverage will continue on CBS News Streaming, your local news, and tonight on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm John Dickerson in New York.